Stop offering certainty and embrace mystery, frailty, and unknowing. Peter Rollins says that's what the church should be about. That interview is coming up, but first, one message. Looking for a small group curriculum for your church that really works? Living Compass is brand new, and it offers a way to bring real transformation into your congregation. Living Compass focuses on wholeness and wellness, and you can check them out at livingcompass.org. Okay, here's your program. Hi everybody, I'm Chris Yaw. Welcome to ChurchNext. It's a place, as you know, where Christians gather to hear from experienced mentors. And today we're joined by a man who's done and is doing some really amazing things in the emergent church world. Irishman, and Peter will talk a little bit about that in a moment. I know we've got some interesting clarifications and distinctions to make, which I'm really looking forward to. He's Irishman Peter Rollins, and he's known for his work with the Ikon faith community, as well as the author of some terrific books. Peter, welcome to ChurchNext. Thanks for being with me. And let's begin with a broad brush question of where you're seeing signs of health and vitality in the Christian church, in Christianity.
Yeah. Well, I guess, one of my concerns with some of, what I see in the church has been this desire to embrace certainty and embrace God as the escape from brokenness. And where I see something really good happening is in communities that are embracing the place of unknowing and mystery within faith, and are exploring the idea of Christianity not as the escape from mystery and the escape from brokenness, but actually in some way as the embrace of those things. And I'm seeing that across different denominations. I'm also seeing it in groups that have left the kind of official church and are doing smaller groups in their houses or in bars or cafes. And that's the kind of work that I'm excited in.
Well, and that's really the truth, isn't it? I mean, how many of us really know who we are, where we came from, and where we're going? So that we live in the midst of the sea of unknowing, and you would hope that faith communities would be able to speak that truth.
Yes, and sadly, sometimes it's because it's not the church's fault at all. I think it's a human desire. We all want certainty. Mm-hmm. We all want to know that everything can be good and everything can be great, and it's a natural tendency. That's why everyone's offering it. Buy this product, look this way, go out with this person and you'll be happy. Follow this political idea or this cultural idea and you'll have the answers. So it's not a religious problem. It's not a problem with the church. It's something that we all as human beings seek. The issue for me is the church shouldn't be like putting another product into the vending machine of life. It shouldn't be saying, well, a BMW won't make you happy or having a big house won't make you happy, but we can. For me, in a sense, Christianity is offering a much more radical message, which is we can live in the midst of brokenness. We can actually embrace difficulties. And actually in the embrace of that, we find a deep joy, not in the escape of it.
Yeah. No. I mean, you speak great truth here. It resonates with a lot of what I hear when I talk to people across the church. Because it comes out of our fear, doesn't it, Peter? I mean, and I like the way that you put it back on us. It's not that we have to blame an institution or anything other than ourselves for desiring this kind of thing, but it comes out of our own deep-seated, just terror, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, and it comes from actually a very natural place. Whenever you're a child, and a child is very weak. A child, if you kick a child out onto the streets, they're not going to survive for very long. And what we do is we give children a story. You're a brave soldier. You're strong. You're beautiful. You're this. You're that. And these stories give you a sense of mastery. They cover over your brokenness. They give you a sense of security. Yeah. The problem is, as we grow, we create other stories that do pretty much the same thing. Narratives that make me feel secure and give me a sense of mastery. Tell me why I on this side of the river am right, and why those people on that side of the river are wrong. But for me, the maturity comes when we're able to begin to embrace our brokenness and our fragmented nature, and we're able to embrace mystery and unknowing. So it comes from a very deep-seated childhood thing, but ultimately it becomes unhealthy when we use our beliefs to protect us from ourselves and our humanity and the difficulties and the beauties of life.
And so when you go off, and as we talked in pre-interview, you just came in from one place and you're going off, I'm sure, to another place where you do a lot of speaking. You're very popular. Is this a message that you have kind of grown into, or is this something that you've just been talking about for a really long time?
Well, I mean, in some respects, this message, and this only came to me really actually a few weeks ago when someone asked me this question directly. They said, this seems like a theology that has kind of grown up from a place of privilege, right? And I was like, well, no, the truth is, this grew up in Northern Ireland, in the heart of the Troubles. My experience was how religion and politics were used to divide us. Yeah. How, belief systems were able to make me say, I'm right and you're wrong. And to such an extent that I could hate and despise you. And so this theology was a response to my lived experience in Northern Ireland. We wanted to create a space where we could encounter the other, where the other could be an instrument of my further conversion, and where we could really listen to and dialogue with each other. So in some respects, this message comes from where I grew up and my response to that conflict-ridden place. Go ahead.
Oh, no. I was going to ask a related question to get back to some of the books that you've written. You use contradictions a lot, and that's a related question because I know that your community, as a gathering of people who are seeking a deeper sense of God, met in a bar. Which many people would not have thought that would be some sort of fitting space. But you use contradiction a lot. And is that because you have a deeper sense of God as being, in a sense, the father of contradictions?
Yeah, I mean, in a sense, what I'm trying to draw out in contradictions is to really explore how we are in conflict with ourselves. And that, what we try and do as human beings is we try to have say a theology or a way of thinking about the world that's right and pure and good. And what we're trying to say is, well, no, to be honest with you, the truth is we do have a certain sense of unknowing in our lives that it doesn't come out during the day. Most of the time I feel very secure and confident in who I am. But at night I realize that I'm a haunted house, that I'm full of ghosts, that people who have hurt me and people I've hurt and people that I've loved and people that I've lost, and that I have lots of concerns and anxieties within me. And in Ikon, largely what we want to do is say to people, we need to confront that. If we don't confront it, we'll repress it. And then what happens is I can't be around someone who thinks differently from me. Now, the reason for that is not because they scare me because, they're other and strange. It's because they expose the otherness that I am to myself. So, for example, whenever there's an author called Rob Bell, and he brought out a book called Love Wins. Right. And there was a certain group of people who really didn't like it. Now, I don't mean disagreed, because lots of people disagree with it. I mean, the Amish would have disagreed with him, but they didn't do anything. There was no outcry from the Amish, right? But there was a certain segment that vehemently disagreed with him. So what did that mean? Well, in psychoanalytic terms, that actually means that there was something he was saying that actually resonated with that community. That the questions he asked were questions that were in that community but hadn't risen to the surface. So what happens is you vehemently attack it. Not because you don't like what they're saying, is you don't like the contradictions within yourself. Because, to be honest, most of my friends disagree with me. That's not a problem. I disagree with me. But whenever I can't stand to be around someone who disagrees with me, that's often evidence that there's things in my life, questions and concerns in me that I haven't brought to the surface. So what I'm saying in this theology is saying, we've got to bring them to the surface. And because if we don't bring them to the surface, they come out in hatred of other people or hatred of ourselves, or they'll come out in over drinking or overeating, or they'll come out in some unhealthy way. And so what we want to do is create a space in which we can come to terms with the brokenness in ourselves. Hence, I use parables and stories, and I use, as you say, kind of like contradictions.
Yeah, that will that will pique our interest and cause us to say, wait a minute, I need to pick that up, because what you're pointing out is a church then, or a community that is going to be healthy then is going to be one that that allows people to be comfortable with not only mystery and unknowing, but being able to own up to who they really are.
Absolutely. And so, I mean, I was talking to someone just last week who was saying to me, they said, well, Pete, I'm part of a church where, I says, I suffer from jealousy, I suffer from anxiety, but he says, I go to church and I say a certain prayer and it really helps me. And, and then I asked him, how long has this been going on for? And he says, well, probably about 10 years. And I was like, then it's not working, right? What's happening is you're able to go to church and say a prayer and it represses this jealousy and anxiety that you have, but then it doesn't work. So you have to go back and do it again and again. What I'm saying is the church, the healthy church, is the place that doesn't try to take away your jealousy and push it down, but tries to say, talk about it, accept it. You're jealous and you're anxious. Why are you? Bring it to the surface. And Kierkegaard said this, he said, if you can accept yourself, then you will change yourself. And this is what grace is for me. If you're doing some behavior that is damaging, and I tell you, don't do it, don't do it, don't do it, that can generate the very opposite. Generates the desire to do what you're being told not to do. For example, if you say to a child, don't open that box when I leave the room, it's the very no that makes them want to open the box, right? That's what Paul meant by transgression in law. Law doesn't stop you from wanting to transgress. It makes you want to transgress. And so the idea is, in grace, you say everything is permissible. Not everything's beneficial, but you can talk about anything. And I accept you for who you are. And in the place where you accept that acceptance and can speak all of your brokenness, can talk about all of your darkness, that's not the place where you'll be oppressed by it. That's the place where it will begin to dissipate. And I think that you'll enter into a deeper and fuller experience of life.
But so then churches need to be places that help us do that, Peter, from what you're describing. And I'm wondering what sort of rituals, what sort of practices, what sort of things should churches be doing in order to help people cultivate? I mean, certainly there's a whole kind of atmosphere that you're describing that needs to be present, that probably needs to be bolstered by some sort of panoply of practices and habits and virtues, etc.
Absolutely. I mean, at the very basic level, I think we can learn from AA. So AA, someone's an alcoholic. They may, up until that point, said, I'm not an alcoholic. I could give up any time I want, etc., etc. Those are the lies that they tell themselves to cover over the truth of who they are. But in AA, the very first thing you have to do is you have to say your name and say you're an alcoholic. So the first thing is you admit to who you are and what you're struggling with. Secondly, it's in a place of grace where everybody just accepts you and goes, yeah, I know how you feel. I'm in the same boat. And the idea is that that's the very place where real change can happen. Now, in addition to that, yes, exactly, we need a liturgical structure that helps us to be honest, that invites us to look at the ghosts that are within us. And one of the ways to do that is to kind of contrast, actually, two different things that people do whenever they go through, say, a breakup or they experience the death of someone that they love. Mm-hmm. One thing you can do is you can go out and get drunk, right? Get drunk and take drugs. And for a night, everything's good. Right. But of course, the next...
Because you've hidden from it.
Yes, you've hidden from it. So the next day it comes back. But you contrast that with a singer-songwriter. If you go and hear a singer-songwriter sing about some of the same issues that you're dealing with, they can reflect back your own brokenness to you in such a way that you begin to work through it. The philosopher Kierkegaard said, what is a poet? A poet is someone who screams and cries in agony, but whose lips are so formed that when they cry out, beautiful music is formed. And so when we say to the poet, sing to us again, we're really saying, may new disasters befall you. And in a sense, what I want to see in the church and encourage in the church is hymns and songs that are not all just about certainty and God being there, but are also saying, God, where are you? I feel lost. I feel alone. That's why I want, churches to, if they hear a really good band in a coffee shop where some musician really helps you connect with your humanity, to say, would you do some worship at our church on Sunday? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Or a stand-up comedian who is able to get us to look at some of the deep tragedies in our lives and actually laugh about them, to say, oh, would you be able to come and do a sermon at our church? Yeah. These are ways, hopefully, of inviting us into a place where we can be honest, I think, with ourselves, and experience, hopefully, a certain freedom from our brokenness.
Where does Jesus fit into this?
Yeah, well, I mean, for me, where I learned all of this stuff is really through reading this Judeo-Christian tradition. That this idea of being able to be honest with oneself, of looking at one's brokenness, speaking it into being, is something that I think is really encouraged both in the Gospels and in subsequent Christian history. We could talk about specifics. For example, it gets very deep very quickly, but very simply, Paul the Apostle talks about 6 tribal identities of his day: Jew, Gentile, slave, free, male, female. Right. These were the identities that people held on to. They told you who you could marry, probably your life expectancy, what you would earn. They told you everything. Yeah. These tribal identities people held on to. They were God-given. Nothing could change. That's who you were. Paul comes in and says, in Christianity, these tribal identities are crossed through. There is neither Jew or Gentile, slave or free, male or female. All are made one in Christ. For Paul, because the cross was the place of the complete outsider. When you were crucified, you were no longer part of the political system or the cultural system, and you were first of God, the religious system. You were the complete outsider. And so what I read from Paul is he's saying, we hold on to these tribal identities. They give us a sense of security, but they protect us from realizing the depth of who we are. They're masks that we hide behind. To identify with Christ is to experience the loss of those identities, and enter into a different space. Right. So that's why I'm interested in kind of critiquing and saying, Christianity is not a tribal identity. Yeah.
Right, and so that has all kinds of ramifications to creeds and to existing liturgies and to ways in which we use, the accoutrements of Christianity to make us into a tribe when we're in fact supposedly beyond it. But I guess I'm responding to the hymns and songs of lament and the stand-up comedian as being, hopefully that's what our worship leaders, our musicians, our organists, and our preachers are able to do, to embody this sort of mirroring of the truth. But I gather from your friendly, gentle critique that that's not something we're seeing enough of.
Well, yeah, I'll give you an example. In churches, you often hear prayers that are very about forgiving and loving your neighbor and being good, right? So those are prayers that you hear all the time. It's rare that you hear prayers that say, I hate my neighbor. I'm really angry with the person down the road. Or even, I want the children of my enemies to be killed. Now you go like, my goodness, of course you're not going to hear prayers like that in church. And yet that's actually a prayer that's directly from the Bible. And you go, well, why would the Bible have prayers like that? But you've got to think about it like this. If someone comes to me and they say, somebody broke up with me, they were having an affair, they really hurt me, how could they have done this to me? I really hate them, they're evil, they're demonic, right? And I say to them, no, please be reasonable, think about it from their perspective and pray forgiveness for them. 2 things will happen. First of all, I could say, hold on a second, if I don't speak this out, I'm going to pop. I need to speak it out. But secondly, and more radically, I could say to you, hold on, I already know that they didn't do this because they're evil. I already know that they did that because I've been sleeping in a separate bedroom from them for 5 years. I haven't been there for them. But I have to speak this out so that I know that. So that maybe one day in the future, I might see them and be able to say, I miss you. I wish things hadn't happened this way, and I'm really sorry. I still think about you often. I do wish blessings in your life. And and shake their hand. Now, the point for me is this, is our prayers have to speak out the moanings and groanings of our heart, our angers, our frustrations, our fears, not because so that we are, held by them, but so that we're freed from them. And that's what my concern is that sometimes in churches, those types of prayers would be not seen as fit for the church. But I think that actually the Christian tradition itself asks us to pray complete honesty. And not only because we should be honest, but actually because it's incredibly powerful and healing for us to do so. Right.
And so prayers are just one aspect of church life that I can imagine that as you tour around in these churches that you get invited to, Peter, that you probably have to bite your tongue a lot of times to if nothing else, to lament the missed potential. The fact that you have a huge gathering of people who are hungry and who are looking for some sort of sustenance, and we're not able to feed them the best that we can.
Yeah, and what I see is it's not the intentions of the community. That's the fun thing.
Yeah.
And but what's even weirder is it's just what we play out and we practice. There's a story I really like just from Northern Ireland, and it's about these soldiers who come over to Belfast during the Troubles, and they're sent to this small town in the middle of nowhere. And the sergeant says to them, "Listen, let me show you a trick I can play with the Irish," right? He says, "Come down to the pub with me tonight and we'll do it." So they go down, and the sergeant sits in the bar, takes out a crumpled old £5 note and a shiny £1 coin, puts them both on a table. And then he calls over one of the Irish guys and says, "Would you rather have this crumpled old £5 note or this bright, shiny £1 coin?" And the drunk guy says, he looks at the gold coin and he picks it up and he bites it and he says, "Oh, mister, could I have the coin?" And so the soldiers all laugh at this, and they play it all night with all of the other soldiers, or with all the other Irish. And there's an American there, and she's horrified by what she sees. So she goes up, and after the soldiers have left, she says, "Do you not know that the £5 note's worth 5 times more than the pound coin?" And Seamus, the Irish guy, he says, "Of course we do. But if we took the £5 note, they'd stop playing the game." Right? So this is what I see in church, that the ministers and the worship leaders are full of doubts and unknowing. They have lots of questions, but they don't express it in the service. And the people in the congregation have doubts and unknowing and brokenness, but they don't express it. So we all play a game that none of us really believe in, because it gives us something. It gives us a sense of security. But what I'm arguing for is saying, no, we've got to be honest. We've got to have ministers who'll say, "Yeah, I am broken and I have doubts." We need to have people in the congregation who'll stand up and say it, and music that expresses it. And my contention is, in doing that, we'll actually lead to a much more healthy community.
Well, it seems from what you're describing, the false community won't be around very long. I mean, especially I'm sure you're privy to the research that's showing more and more, especially young people, are really being honest about where they are in their belief in God and their doubts about God. And that this is becoming a bigger part of our society, that if we want to be places that welcome people in who are seeking to nurture the spiritual side of their lives, that we be open to accepting them as they are and being able to be honest with their doubts. I mean, it seems like they can teach the rest of the church a lot.
Yes. I mean, I think that there always, there's groups of young people who really break things open. I would say this, however, my concern is actually, while yes, people are turning away from the certainty that's given by the church, my concern is that they're not turning away from certainty. They're just finding it elsewhere. That they're buying into secular forms of what will make you happy. So they don't believe that Jesus is going to kind of give them lots of money and make everything right. But they might believe that having the right job or the right family or whatever will make them, or the bigger house will give them the joy and certainty. But this is a unique opportunity for the church, because the church can then hopefully be able to say, we are the space that gives you, and this is key for me, not freedom to pursue what will make you happy, whole, and complete, but freedom from the pursuit of what you think will make you happy, whole, and complete. In other words, the church comes in and says, Yes, you're free to pursue what you want in the world. Brilliant. If you think $1 million will make you happy or bigger eyes, you've got the freedom to pursue that. But we're offering the freedom from that pursuit. We're saying that it won't make you happy. And you know what? Maybe being able to live and embrace what you already have and find depth in what you already have is what will bring you meaning. So the church is not designed to give you things, because if I give you 10 things, but I can't help you experience the depth and beauty of those things, I've given you nothing. In fact, if I could extend your life by 10,000 years, but I couldn't help you experience the joy of life, I'm a devil. So for me, the church is the place. It doesn't give you things. It helps you experience the depth and the sacredness and the beauty of the things you already have, the people who are around you, the things that you already do. And that's a beautiful freedom. But the issue is, for me, all of us, through all of time, human beings will always want certainty and satisfaction. We'll always want something that will make everything good. And it takes a lot of work to get to the place of realizing that desire for certainty and satisfaction actually generates its opposite. It generates deep insecurities, and I have to then protect myself from people who think differently. And it also, the pursuit of joy and happiness and wholeness leads me into futile pursuits. And that's why Oscar Wilde said there's only one thing worse than not getting what you want, and it's getting it. Because if I, for example, think $10 million will make me completely happy, if I don't get it, I'm unhappy. But if I do get it, I realize that, okay, I can have a nicer life, but I've still got the difficulties of existence. It hasn't made me perfect,
So those who are leading our congregations, what do you recommend are some of the practices that those who find themselves in leadership positions should be pursuing?
It's difficult because what I'm asking people to do can potentially get people to lose their jobs. But I'll be very clear about what I'm asking. If I was talking to a minister, I want to encourage them to be honest about their insecurities and their anxieties. Not as a self-help group, that they're up there talking about their brokenness to make themselves feel better, but to allow people in the congregations to go, okay, I can be honest about my uncertainties and unknowing. Now, what happens, but is interesting, in an unhealthy community, if a minister gets up and says, I have brokenness, I have concerns, sometimes I don't know if I believe any of it, then in an unhealthy community, people get angry. Now, why do they get angry? It's very key. If to use another kind of example of relationships, I say to somebody, I think your husband is having an affair, and they get really angry with me, and they kick me out of the house and don't want to talk to me, right? I have to go, oh, don't you? Because why would they be angry? If they were surprised or shocked, it would be, okay, that you don't know. But if they're angry, it's, but you don't want to know that you know, so you have to kick me out. So some people, if in the congregation, if a minister says, I'm full of brokenness and unknowing, they might go, oh, I didn't know that, I'm confused. That's fine. But if they get angry, it's often because, well, we already know it. We just don't want to know that we know it. But now I have to face my own brokenness and anxiety. All right. Is to ask ministers to try to subtly begin to bring that out, to help people feel more comfortable with their own anxieties. And just one healthy example. In a church called Revolution NYC, I saw this happen where the minister got up and said, I've sung the gospel all my life. He says, I believe it all. He says, the Bible, even the letter's genuine. He says, I believe it all. But then he says, but 3 weeks ago my father died. And he said, and I can't say that anymore. I am broken. And he says, and I want to tell you that, I want to be honest, that I've got anger with God. I don't know if God's even listening or if God's there. And if you'd like me to step aside for a few months, I totally understand. And you know what happened? The people in that little bar of 30 people said, it's fine. It's okay. You've told us that that's okay. And when I saw that, I was like, wow, this is a church I could be part of.
Yeah. When you have people who are, well, one of the first scenario you brought up, Peter, in order for somebody to be attracted to a church that is going to react like that, it's going to be very difficult for that person to be honest, because usually communities that feel that way attract people that are going to be able to promulgate that, right? So, I mean, you know, that becomes double hard to bring honesty into a place like that.
Yes, no, absolutely. And this is why I've got an idea, and I want to do a tour in which I'm going to kind of do an altar call, and I'm going to go through America, and I'm going to talk about doubt and unknowing and brokenness, and I'm going to ask people if that's true in their lives, that they have not only accepted that, but found benefit and maturity in that. And then I'm going to ask people to bow their heads, and I'm going to bring out a document, a declaration of doubt, and I'm going to ask people to come up and sign it. And instead of a statement of faith, a declaration of, this is a declaration of, I am broken and I have lots of questions, and it's part of my faith. And the reason why I want to do that is because if 1 or 2 leaders say it, they get fired. But if 2,000 or 3,000 leaders say it, you begin to change the system. Now that's going to be a hard tour to do, but it's something that I want, because as I say, I see individuals get knocked off, but I know that if people in mass come out, we could really make a difference.
Well, you know, it's interesting. You remind me of an article I read not too long ago about a young minister who had tried to start a church and failed. And so he had nothing to do, so he thought he would start a pastor's conference called Fail. And you can only come if you're honest about, you know, the failings that you have, the doubts and unknowings, as you put it. And he said it was jammed. I think they've had it 2 or 3 years in a row now, and they keep having to get bigger places, because I think that even among those of us who, you know, feel called to be in leadership positions in congregations, we need to come to that place. And what you're saying, suggesting, is that this is the place where real communion with God happens. Yes, absolutely. I mean, for me, I am arguing for the death of a certain view of God. A certain God is, Bonhoeffer called it the Deus Ex Machina. Basically, the God who you wheel in when things are bad or you don't understand something. You wheel God in and it makes everything right. But for me, there is this idea of God in the midst of our brokenness, God in the midst of our unknowing, God who helps us experience the depth of life. God is there where we love, where we really try to be honest, where we face up to our monstrosity so that we are not monsters. That's very key, by the way. For me, if we do not face up to our inhumanity, we will become inhuman. There's a guy called Ed Dobson. He was part of the religious right in America for a long time, but he's actually dying now of a muscular disease, and he created these very short videos called Ed's Story. And in one of them, he goes and he finds a person who they fired from their organization. And he felt they fired her for the wrong reasons. And he found her and he apologized to her. He asked her for forgiveness. And honestly, I was brought to tears. He was facing, in a sense, he was facing death. And so he wanted to face his own inhumanity, things that he'd done in his life. But in facing his inhumanity, he became more human. And this is what I see in the conversion of Paul. A friend of mine, Barry Taylor, said this to me. He said, what happened to Paul on the road to Damascus, it wasn't really a revelation of light, because he went blind. He was blinded, and he didn't eat for 3 days. In some respects, it was a revelation of darkness. He encountered his darkness. Why do you persecute me? In other words, Paul realized that he was going around and killing people, persecuting people, killing God, right? Persecuting God. He was confronted with his own monstrosity, his own inhumanity, and he was changed. He was no longer the same person. And that's the kind of conversion I want to see in the church, is that we face our monstrosity so as we don't become monsters. And by the way, this gets to the heart of the message for me. See, we all want a burning bush, right? A burning bush experience where, something that will give us all of the answers, somewhere where we're in the desert, out there in the middle of nowhere, that will make us feel good. But I think the church can help us realize a truth that we already know, that every bush is burning, that the sacred is everywhere, that everything can have depth if we can be honest and face up to, experience grace, experience love, be the site where grace and love take place for other people. We discover that God is right here, right now. And so we look for ways in which that's made real to us. And so are you calling for us to really, and when I get back to my questions about habits and practices, to really just take notice?
Yes, to take, I mean, the big trick for me is, yes, to take notice, but to be honest, to have the courage to be honest. And that's, by the way, I mean, the difficult thing for us is we try to hide ourselves from ourselves. Like, for example, I say, oh, I love kids, right? I love animals. But the truth is I eat meat. And I do kind of know that the meat industry has lots of cruelty going on. And I do buy chocolate bars that I kind of know the cocoa beans come from the Ivory Coast, but picked by 11 and 12-year-olds who are being physically and sexually abused. And so what I do is I'm like the alcoholic. I say, oh, I love kids. But if I know that, there's something that's not my belief. That's a story I tell myself to cover over the truth of what I believe. There's a very brief parable that says a king comes back to his palace and he sees a beggar at the gates. He goes in and he says to his servants, there's a beggar there. Get rid of him, execute him, kill him, do whatever you have to do. He says, you know that I'm such a kind and compassionate man that I cannot bear to look upon such suffering. Right? And in many respects, we play a similar game. We have a story we tell ourselves about ourselves that often covers over our material reality. Just like the alcoholic says, I can give up any time I want. I'm not an alcoholic. And for me, it takes great bravery and great courage to ask, what do I really believe? Who am I really? And in order to find that, you have to sometimes do spiritual counseling. You have to take a diary. You have to look at your practices very honestly, you know, so to find your values and to find your beliefs. In fact, the last thing you should do is listen to what you say, because what you say is designed not to expose what you believe, but to protect yourself from the horror of your beliefs. And in Christianity, this is called believing from the heart. That's why the Bible doesn't talk about believing in the mind. That's a very modern notion that my beliefs are in my mind. The Bible says your beliefs are in your heart. And you don't actually maybe know what your beliefs are because they're in your heart, but you live them out. They come out in your being. They come out, and by the way, not in your everyday life. They come out when you're tired, when you're angry, when your back's against the wall. That's when you find out what people really believe.
Right. And, you know, I kind of want to give you a little bit of pushback because of the examples that you brought up when you talked about meat loving and chocolate eating. You know, there's certainly we say we love animals and we love children, but you wonder what you can do as an individual to go against the meat industry or the chocolate industry. You can stop eating meat, you can stop eating chocolate, and then you can say perhaps more fully that you know, I'm a child lover and an animal lover, because at the end of the day, you'd have to pretty much starve yourself. You know, yes. I mean, we're in a broken world, but I guess what you're chiding us to do is to be honest about it and say, you know, I participate in this place. Well, I don't think you want us to live in eternal guilt, but you want us to live in in a better depth of knowing.
Yes, exactly. I mean, the argument I'm making is not that, you know, necessarily you go out and get a place in the middle of nowhere. Now, that you may do that. The argument is simply there's a difference between admitting it, acknowledging it, and trying to go, what should I do about it? And the whole thing of not acknowledging it, hiding yourself from it, pretending to yourself. And by the way, the funny thing for me is, it's guilt that stops us from facing up to it. It's not the guilt. Guilt doesn't come from facing up to it. It's like the alcoholic. They say, I'm not an alcoholic. I could give up anytime I want because they haven't found a place where they can be accepted for who they are, for being an alcoholic, you're an alcoholic and that's okay, right? So strangely, people think, oh, you're trying to make me feel guilty. And I go, no. I think we already feel guilty, hence we can't be honest about who we are. But if you feel genuine love, where you can be honest about who you are, then you're free to speak. And my contention is, when you're able to really face who you are begins to change very gradually and over time. But who you are will change as you face up to yourself.
Mm-hmm. And that's I guess the back to AA. I mean, because the whole thing doesn't begin until you're able to make that first admission, right?
Yes.
So we need to see more AA in the church, or at least more of the honesty behind it, huh?
Yeah. I mean, I think in some respects in the 20th century, which I think has been a very poor time for theology, I have to say. I think the 19th century is much richer, but in the 20th century, I think one of the most interesting Christian movements is AA. And the crazy thing about it is, one, you don't know where they are, but you could throw a stone and you'd probably hit an AA meeting. So it's kind of one of the great unsung developments of theology is AA, and while I want to be in critical engagement with some of the practices of AA, I think that the church as a whole could learn so much from how AA meetings run. I think that would be a great innovation for many churches to really look seriously at some of the basic ideas that run behind those groups.
Yeah, and authenticity certainly being one. I mean, I like the sense of they never own a place. They never make a big deal about money, yet they never really seem to be in want.
Yes.
I mean, there are certainly a lot of examples we can pull away. Before I let you go, I do want to talk about, Peter, the kind of practices you are finding nourishing to you. I've caught you in the middle of a storm right now. The East Coast is ready to get hammered by a storm. You're moving from place to place, but you regularly move from place to place in terms of your speaking and that kind of thing. What are the personal practices that you find helpful?
Yes. I mean, because what people don't know about me often is they see me as a speaker, and I live in America now at the moment, and I seem divorced from certain practices. So they're going, you're a writer. But actually, the first 10 years of my work was with a community called Ikon in Belfast, and moving to America was a strategic move. It was a move to try to help reach more people. But I miss that community every day. Maybe not every day, but I miss it deeply, and I have felt detached from practices. I have felt detached from things that ground me and anchor me. And so what's exciting is a few months ago I started a new group, Ikon NYC in New York, and it's exciting because now again I feel like I'm part of a community of people who I care about and who care about me, and we're engaging in certain practices. We meet once a month in a place called Deity in Brooklyn. And I'm so happy, man, honestly, because being on the road and traveling from one place to the other can be a lonely place and can take its toll. And I'm just so glad to be linking back in with something in New York.
Is once a month enough? I mean, I guess I'm also asking the personal kind of practices that because I think, especially with the
Transformance arts, yeah.
Yeah, the society that we live in of people, and my own family. I mean, they're constantly going from one place to another, getting to responsibilities and to fulfill vocations and that kind of thing. That I do wonder if there are certain techniques or practices that on a daily level help keep you anchored.
That's true, and actually, and in terms of Ikon, it is the main gathering is once a month. You're right, although we also meet once a week to plan it. And just as an aside, the planning for me is probably more important actually than the gathering itself. It's like maybe an artist who enjoys the painting almost more than the final product.
Well, it's a bit like writing a sermon, isn't it? In that you're writing it all week and you're immersed in this thing, so that really by the time that you deliver it, you've already felt the change and the transformation in yourself.
That's right. And so in a sense, it's like a communal sermon writing, because what we do is we bring a group together, and the great thing is we try to invite anybody who wants to be part of that group. So technically everybody who goes to the Transformance Art gatherings could go to the weekly meetings. In fact, half of the people who were there at the last meeting were part of the planning group, which is exciting for me. I go it's rare, I suppose, in a church where half the people in the room were part of the actual development, so that was a lot of fun. But you are right, totally. I need daily activities. I'm an introvert. That's another thing people, although it's obvious, sometimes it's public people are often introverts, but sometimes
most of your great actors are introverts.
That's right. Yeah. So I need to spend a couple of hours a day in reflection, in writing, in personal exploration. In trying to be honest, and that does involve a form of prayer. Yeah. It does involve a form of spiritual disciplines, and And so in some respects, it's quite a traditional thing, and I need that every day, because if I can't be honest with myself, by the way, if what I do becomes professional, if I start to do my stuff and I don't feel it, I'm just doing it because it's a job or whatever, I have to stop. I have to make sure that everything, like this interview, is coming from the depths of me trying to be honest. Now that doesn't mean I am being honest, and it doesn't mean that I'm going to be good, but if I'm not trying to delve into the depths, I'm being dishonest. And so even this interview, the fact that I've been traveling at the very beginning, I felt that I wasn't in a place to give myself fully to this interview, and that was disappointing. Now I feel that we have got to that point, but I need that, and I need a couple of hours every day to try to be that. And the day that stops, the day I'll stop.
Right. And I do want to ask you a question before we go, though, on the future and where you see, where's Christianity going? And I mean, I think you've helped answer that by, hopefully the healthier branches are going towards places of mystery, places of truth-telling, places of embracing one's search and unknowingness. Are you seeing? How are you seeing this kind of play out, though, when it comes to forming communities?
Yeah, I mean, I have to be honest and say, I could say, it's going great, and of course, from my perspective, it might be, because I keep getting invited to the places where stuff's happening.
Right.
So I could very quickly go, oh, look, it's happening everywhere. But of course, these are small groups. Most of the people I meet with, I mean, there's 3 places in the last 2 weeks have been in like breweries and coffee shops with a few people who are interested in these ideas, who have very little money, very little expertise, lots of passion, lots of intelligence, lots of beautiful people, but not rich in resources. But what's exciting to me is, yes, it is taking me all over the place. I was just back from New Zealand and Australia. I generally, bounce around a lot of places in America, and I'm seeing these communities, both within the church, the established church, and outside of it, that are exploring and trying to be honest about this. So I do see signs of hope. I also, by the way, I'm not the only person, of course, who has a vision for what the future church will be, but the vision that I'm a part of, vision of, as you say, this ability to create liturgical spaces that invite us into honesty, invite us into mystery and unknowing, and to explore the anxieties within us, etc. I do see signs of hope that's happening. And by the way, the big thing for me is we've seen a kind of progression in a lot of Christians now. A great lot of Christians do embrace these ideas. So I think that is happening. There's thousands, tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of Christians feel comfortable. The challenge now is that we need that expressed in the liturgical structure itself. Yeah. Because what I noticed from my first book is a lot of people said, yes, we can embrace doubt, unknowing, and complexity. And yet when I looked at the structures, the songs and the prayers and the sermons were all about certainty and God is Jesus, my boyfriend, all of that stuff, And in a sense, we didn't have to be fundamentalists because the church was being fundamentalist for us. And to use an example, if a child believes in Santa Claus, the parents don't need to believe because they get the psychological pleasure of the belief from the child. Hence, if the child stops believing, it can be often more traumatic for the parents, right? They never believed anyway, but they were protected from the trauma of it. What I want to say is, next we need the church to embrace it. And it will be traumatic, like the parent who has to experience that loss. But the trauma, I think, is important and necessary for us to enter into life in all its fullness. And to be honest, life before death. C.S. Lewis once said, Christianity is like a rumour going round a doll's house that one day we might live. And that's what I'm interested in, is I think we live in a form of death and denial. And the church invites us to say, you know what, one day you can live. Not maybe in the next life, that's one thing, but actually in this life. In this life, it's possible to live before you die. And it comes from having the courage to be honest.
Yeah, well, very well put. And, it's interesting, as I was coming up to our interview, I was talking with some people who one of them was denigrating somebody else who wasn't present. And it came to me to think that, you know, whenever we participate in that kind of denigration, whether it be a person or an institution, it gets back to what you're saying about our own uneasiness with them. So that the church's job has to really be to help us mirror that inside ourselves, because that's how we lead to reconciliation, which is the job of the church.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. I mean, there's a wee story that I like. It's just a guy on a desert island, and after 20 years, no one lives on the island but him, you know. He's rescued, and before they take him off the island, somebody says, "Can you show me where you lived?" So he brings him to a clearing, and there's 3 houses, 3 dwellings. And he says, "What's this first one?" He goes, "Oh, that's where I lived." Right? Great. What's the second one? And the guy says, "Well, I'm a very religious man." He says, "I built this as my church. It's where I worship every week, and every Tuesday I go to pray." And then one of the people says, "Well, what's the building beside it?" And the guy goes, "Oh," he says, "I don't want to talk about that. I don't want to talk about that." So, "What is it?" And he says, "Oh," he says, "That's the church I used to go to." Hate the place, right? Now, the idea being, you know, we're always trying to say the other, that's the bad place. That's the place where things are wrong. That's where the badness is. But that's often a reflection of something, a struggle that we have within us. And say, this is not about not disagreeing with people. Of course, I love disagreement. I'm Irish. That's why the Irish are God's chosen people. We love a fight, you know. We love disagreeing and arguing. But we argue as friends. Right. And I'm not threatened by your beliefs or what. But when I'm threatened by them, when I can't stand to be around them, often, and when I have to denigrate you because you don't think the same as me, that generally I have to ask questions about what's that say about myself.
Mm-hmm. Peter Rollins, thank you for being my guest here on Church Next.
Thank you.